Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Horizon, watching the stars through the large window. He had been in space for 12 years, but the view still amazed him. The ship was humanity's best, though he knew it was nothing compared to what other species might have. Earth had only just learned to travel between planets in their own solar system. The communication officer turned toward him. "Captain, we're getting strange signals again. Same as yesterday." Hyunwoo walked over to the communication station. For the past week, they had been picking up signals that seemed too organized to be natural. The patterns were complex, almost like language, but unlike anything humans had ever heard. "Have you tried running them through the computer again?" Hyunwoo asked. "Yes, sir. The computer says these signals are definitely artificial. Someone is talking out there." Hyunwoo felt his heart beat faster. For hundreds of years, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Space was so big and Earth seemed so small. Most people believed there had to be other life somewhere, but no one had ever found proof. Meanwhile, millions of kilometers away, Admiral So Young was leading humanity's first mission beyond their solar system. Her ship, the UES Determination, was the largest vessel humans had ever built. It carried 300 people and enough supplies for 2 years in deep space. "Admiral, we're approaching the target coordinates," her navigation officer reported. So Young nodded. They were investigating strange readings that Earth's telescopes had detected. Something big was out there, something that didn't belong in empty space. "Slow to minimum speed. I want full sensor sweeps of the area." As the Determination moved forward, the sensors began picking up massive objects. At first, the crew thought they might be asteroids, but the shapes were too regular, too purposeful. "Admiral," the sensor operator called out, his voice shaking slightly. "You need to see this." On the main screen, images appeared that made everyone on the bridge go silent. Spread across space for thousands of kilometers were the remains of enormous ships. These weren't human ships. The designs were completely alien, with curves and angles that human engineers would never think to use. Dr. Tae-min, the team's specialist in ancient history and archaeology, stared at the wreckage with wide eyes. "These ships are huge," he whispered. "Each one is bigger than anything we've ever built." So Young studied the images carefully. "How long have they been here?" "Based on the metal decay and radiation signatures, I'd say at least 1,000 years, maybe more," Dr. Tae-min replied. "Can we get closer? I want teams on those ships." Within hours, shuttlecraft were moving between the dead vessels. The first boarding team, led by Commander Jin-ho, entered what appeared to be the bridge of one ship. The alien technology was far beyond human understanding, but even Jin-ho could see this had been a warship. "Admiral, these ships weren't just destroyed," Jin-ho reported over the radio. "They were completely torn apart. Whatever did this was incredibly powerful." Dr. Tae-min was examining another wreck with his team. The alien writing on the walls meant nothing to him, but the blast patterns and damage told a clear story. "This was a battle," he said. "A big one, and someone won." Back on Earth, Captain Hyunwoo was still trying to decode the strange signals when his communication officer suddenly sat up straight. "Captain, the signal just changed. It's much stronger now, and it's coming from multiple sources." Hyunwoo grabbed his headset. "Play it through the speakers." What they heard made everyone on the bridge freeze. It wasn't random noise or simple signals. It was clearly language, spoken by multiple voices, and it sounded urgent, almost panicked. "Sir," the communication officer said quietly, "I think someone is trying to talk to us." The signals were coming from 12 different directions, all pointing toward areas of space where Earth's telescopes had never detected anything unusual. Whoever was sending these messages had been watching Earth for a long time, staying hidden. Meanwhile, Dr. Tae-min had made a disturbing discovery in the alien wreckage. Hidden in what appeared to be a data storage device, he found recordings. The alien technology was far advanced, but some things were universal. Images of destruction, maps showing the movement of attacking forces, and most frightening of all, a pattern. "Admiral So Young," he called over the communication system. "I need to speak with you immediately." In the Admiral's ready room, Dr. Tae-min spread out his findings. These ships belonged to at least 6 different species, all advanced, all powerful, and all destroyed by the same enemy. How can you tell? The weapon signatures are identical across all the wrecks. Something attacked them using the same technology, the same methods. But here's the really scary part. Dr. Tayman activated a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked locations where similar battles had been fought. This enemy, whoever they are, they're not random raiders. They're following a pattern, moving from the outer edge of the galaxy toward the center. Each victory makes them stronger because they're taking technology and knowledge from everyone they defeat. So Young stared at the map. Where are they now? Based on this pattern and the age of these battles, they should be approaching the core systems, the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Back on the horizon, Captain Hyunwoo was working with his best linguist to understand the alien signals. After hours of analysis, they had made some progress. Captain, the chief linguist reported, we've identified several key phrases. This word appears to mean danger or warning. This one seems to mean help or assistance. And this phrase keeps repeating. We think it means please respond. Hyunwoo realized that Earth was receiving distress calls. Someone out there knew about humanity and was asking for help. But help against what? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. The strongest signal source suddenly went silent. Then another. One by one, the voices calling to Earth were disappearing. On the Determination, Admiral So Young received an urgent message from Earth. The signals that had been detected were going dark, one after another. Whatever was destroying civilizations across the galaxy was moving faster than anyone had predicted. Dr. Tayman looked at his latest calculations and felt cold fear wash over him. Admiral, if the pattern holds, they'll reach the most advanced civilizations within months, not years, and after that, they'll have absorbed so much technology and knowledge that nothing will be able to stop them. They'll own the galaxy. Just then, the Determination's communication officer received a message unlike anything humans had ever seen before. It was clearly artificial, transmitted on frequencies that human technology could barely detect, and it was directed specifically at their ship. Admiral, we're receiving a formal communication. It's addressed to the representatives of the human species. So Young felt her hands shake slightly. Put it on screen. The image that appeared showed a being unlike anything in human imagination. Tall, graceful, with skin that seemed to shimmer like metal. When it spoke, the words were automatically translated by technology far beyond human understanding. People of Earth, the alien said. I am Council Speaker Vextai of the Galactic Alliance. We have watched your species for 3 centuries, waiting for you to develop enough to join galactic society. We had planned to contact you in another 100 years when your technology was more advanced. The alien paused, and for a moment, So Young could see something like fear in its alien features. However, circumstances have changed. An enemy we call the Devourers has emerged from the dark space between galaxies. They have already consumed 17 star systems and defeated every military force sent against them. Our combined fleets are in retreat, and we estimate we have months before our core worlds fall. The message continued, but So Young barely heard the rest. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, but they had learned this fact at the worst possible time. An enemy was coming that had defeated civilizations thousands of years more advanced than Earth. We are sending you our location, the alien concluded. If your species possesses any knowledge or capabilities that might help in this war, please come. We know you are young and your technology is primitive, but we are desperate. The galaxy is running out of hope. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in complete silence. So Young looked around at her crew, seeing her own thoughts reflected in their faces. Humanity had just learned they were part of a vast galactic community, and that community was dying. Commander Jinho watched through the observation deck of the orbital station as something impossible happened in space before him. The Andromedan Defense Fleet, made up of ships that looked like floating cities, was being destroyed by enemies. He could barely see. The alien vessels were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Their hulls were made of some kind of living metal that changed colors as they moved. Energy shields surrounded them like glowing bubbles, Weapons that shot pure light cut through space with deadly accuracy. But they were dying. The attackers appeared as dark shapes against the stars, ships that seemed to bend light around them. When they fired, space itself seemed to tear apart. The Andromedan shields, which had protected their species for thousands of years, lasted only seconds before collapsing. "How many ships are they losing?" Jinho asked the station commander, an alien with gray skin and large black eyes. "The entire fleet," the alien replied, his voice flat with shock. 1,200 vessels, all destroyed in less than an hour. Jinho had been stationed here as humanity's first military observer, a role that had seemed mostly ceremonial until today. Now he was watching the complete destruction of a space navy that could have conquered Earth without effort. "Their ships are so much better than ours," Jinho whispered. "If they can't fight these devourers, what chance do we have?" On Earth, engineer Haiwan was working 18-hour days in a secret underground facility. Around her, the best human scientists and engineers were trying to understand alien technology recovered from the ancient battlefield. The work was frustrating and often impossible. "The problem," Haiwan explained to her team, "is that their engineering is completely different from ours. Look at this power system." On the table before them lay what appeared to be a simple crystal, but their instruments showed it contained more energy than a nuclear reactor. The crystal was perfectly efficient, converting matter directly into usable power with no waste heat. "No radiation and no moving parts. It's beautiful," one of her engineers said. "How do they do it?" "That's what we can't figure out," Haiwan replied. "Our technology is all about brute force and backup systems. If one part breaks, we have 3 more to take its place. But this alien technology is so advanced that nothing ever breaks. They don't need backup systems because their primary systems never fail." She picked up a human-made power cell and compared it to the alien crystal. The human device was 10 times larger, needed constant maintenance, and produced a fraction of the power. But Haiwan was beginning to think this might be an advantage. What happens when something does break their perfect systems? She wondered aloud. At the United Nations building in New York, Ambassador Yu Jin was attending the most important meeting in human history. Representatives from 12 alien species had come to Earth to formally ask for humanity's help in their war against the Devourers. The aliens were trying to be polite, but Yu Jin could see the doubt in their expressions. The lead ambassador, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, spoke for the group. "Your species shows great courage in offering assistance," the alien said. "However, we must be honest about the situation. The Devourers have defeated civilizations that have existed for millions of years. They have technologies that we cannot understand, weapons that ignore our strongest defenses." Another alien, this one covered in what looked like living scales, added, "Your ships use chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. These are technologies that our ancestors abandoned before your planet had complex life. We appreciate your willingness to help, but we do not see how such primitive tools could make a difference." Yujin felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "What you call primitive, we call proven. Human weapons may be simple, but they work. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to break things." The blue-skinned alien looked uncomfortable. "We do not wish to offend, but war for us is a precise science. We use directed energy weapons, quantum disruption fields, and molecular disassemblers. Violence is regulated by the laws of physics and the conventions of civilized warfare." "Civilized warfare," Yujin repeated. "With respect, how civilized is it when you're losing?" The meeting grew tense, but eventually the aliens agreed to accept any help humanity could provide. They were too desperate to refuse, even if they believed human assistance would be meaningless. Captain Dong Hyun stood in the shipyard, looking up at the vessel that would carry humanity's hopes to war. The UES Indomitable had been built in just 4 months, the fastest construction project in human history. It was also the ugliest ship ever created. Where alien vessels were graceful and beautiful, the Indomitable looked like a flying brick. Its hull was thick armor plating welded together in overlapping layers. Instead of one main engine, it had 12 smaller ones, so if some were destroyed, the ship could still move. The weapons were mounted in heavily armored turrets that could be operated manually if the computers failed. She's not pretty, Dong-hyun said to his chief engineer, but she's tough. Captain, the alien advisors are worried about our weapon systems, the engineer replied. They say kinetic weapons and chemical explosives are too unpredictable for space combat. Dong-hyun smiled grimly. Good, unpredictable is what we want. The alien military advisors had tried to convince the humans to use energy weapons, but the human designers refused. Instead, the Indomitable carried railguns that fired solid metal slugs, missile launchers loaded with nuclear warheads, and something the aliens had never seen before: close-range guns that fired chemical explosive shells. Why would you want to fight at close range in space? One alien advisor had asked. Because, Dong-hyun had replied, sometimes you need to look your enemy in the eye when you kill them. Dr. Yoon-ji, the ship's science officer, was studying everything the aliens had shared about the Devourers. The information was limited, but what she found worried her. Captain, she reported, the Devourers aren't really a species in the way we understand it. They're more like a collective consciousness made up of absorbed knowledge from conquered civilizations. What does that mean? For us, it means they learn from every battle. Every time they destroy an enemy fleet, they absorb not just the technology, but the tactical knowledge, the strategic thinking, even the cultural understanding of how that species fights wars. Dong-hyun frowned. So they get smarter with every victory. Exactly. And they've been winning for a very long time. They know how every major galactic civilization fights. They can predict their strategies, counter their weapons, and exploit their weaknesses. But they've never fought humans before. Dr. Yoon-ji nodded slowly. That's our only advantage. They have no data on human warfare because no one in the galaxy fights the way we do. The Indomitable launched from Earth orbit on a Tuesday morning. Millions of people around the world watched as humanity's first interstellar warship departed for a battle they might not survive. The ship carried a crew of 800, making it small compared to alien vessels, but every person aboard was a volunteer. As they traveled toward the rendezvous point, the crew received regular updates on the war. The news was always bad. The Devourers had destroyed another star system. The galactic fleet had retreated again. More civilizations were falling every day. Captain, his communication officer reported one morning, we're receiving a message from the Galactic Fleet Commander. He wants to speak with you personally. The alien who appeared on screen was obviously a military leader. His species looked somewhat like humans, but taller and thinner, with skin that had a metallic sheen. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority and desperation. Captain Dong-hyun, I am Fleet Admiral Kyung-soo of the Centaurian Alliance. I want to thank you for bringing your ship to aid us. But I must be clear about our situation. We have lost 70% of our combined fleet. The Devourers have adapted to all of our weapons and tactics. This next battle may be the last chance to stop them before they reach the core worlds. Dong-hyun studied the alien admiral's face. What do you need us to do? Your ship will be assigned to the support fleet well behind the main battle line. When our primary forces engage the enemy, your role will be to assist with evacuation of damaged vessels and search and rescue operations. With respect, Admiral, we didn't come here to watch, we came to fight. The alien admiral's expression didn't change. Captain, I understand your species' desire to contribute, but you must understand the reality. Your weapons cannot penetrate Devourer shields. Your ship cannot outmaneuver their vessels. Your technology is thousands of years behind theirs. The greatest service you can provide is to help save lives when the battle is lost. Dong-hyun felt his jaw clench, but he kept his voice steady. We'll be there, Admiral, but don't be surprised if we end up closer to the fighting than you expect. After the transmission ended, Dong-hyun's first officer approached him. Captain, maybe he's right. Maybe we should focus on rescue operations. Maybe, Dong-hyun replied, but I didn't bring 800 of Earth's best warriors across the galaxy to run a taxi service. We're going to fight, and we're going to show these aliens how humans wage war. The Indomitable continued toward the staging area, carrying the hopes of a planet and the pride of a species that refused to accept its place as a minor player in Galactic. The staging area was unlike anything Captain Dong-hyun had ever imagined. Thousands of alien warships floated in formation, representing 12 different species and hundreds of years of military technology. Each vessel was a work of art, with graceful curves and gleaming hulls that reflected the light of nearby stars. Then the UES Indomitable arrived, and everything went quiet. "Captain," his communication officer reported, "we're receiving a lot of attention. I'm picking up communications from at least 50 different ships, all asking what that thing is." Dong-hyun looked out at the alien fleet and understood their confusion. Next to their elegant vessels, the Indomitable looked like a flying junkyard. Its hull was covered in armor plating, sensor arrays, and weapon mounts that stuck out at odd angles. Where the alien ship seemed to flow through space, the human vessel looked like it had been built to smash through anything in its way. Fleet Admiral Kyung-soo contacted them within minutes of their arrival. The alien commander appeared on screen, and Dong-hyun could see him trying to hide his reaction to the human ship. "Captain Dong-hyun, welcome to the Kepler Defense Force. Your ship will be assigned to Grid Section 7 in the rear support area. Your orders are to remain at least 10,000 kilometers from the main battle line and assist with rescue operations as needed." "Understood, Admiral. What can you tell us about the enemy?" Kyung-soo's expression grew dark. "The Devourer fleet is larger than any force they have deployed before. Our scouts report at least 200 vessels, including ship types we have never encountered. They will arrive in approximately 6 hours." After the transmission ended, Tactical Officer Subin began studying the battle plans and previous engagement records. What she found disturbed her more than the enemy's power. "Captain, I need to show you something," she said, calling up tactical displays on the main screen. "Look at these battle recordings from previous fights." The images showed Devourer ships engaging Allied forces. The enemy vessels were unlike anything in human experience, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light, moving in ways that violated basic physics. "Notice their response patterns," Subin continued. "When the Allies use plasma weapons, the Devourers adapt their shields within minutes. When they switch to quantum torpedoes, the enemy develops countermeasures even faster. They're learning." During the battle, Chief Weapons Officer Minho joined the discussion. "What about kinetic weapons? Have the Allies tried just hitting them with solid objects?" Subin checked the records. "No. Every engagement has used energy-based weapons. Plasma, cannons, particle beams, molecular disruptors, all very advanced, all very sophisticated, and all very predictable," Minho observed. "Captain, I think we might have an advantage here. Our weapons are so primitive that the enemy might not know how to respond to them." Dong-hyun studied the tactical data. "What about their hull composition? Any weaknesses?" "The reports say their ships are made of some kind of adaptive material that hardens against energy impacts. But there's no data on how it responds to physical impacts." Dr. Yunji, who had been listening from her science station, spoke up. "Captain, I've been analyzing the enemy behavior patterns. The Devourers learn by absorbing information from their enemies. They understand alien technology because they've conquered species that use similar systems. But human technology might be so different that they can't adapt to it quickly." The hours passed slowly as the combined fleet prepared for battle. Dong-hyun walked through his ship, checking on his crew. In the weapons bay, Minho was supervising the loading of the railguns with depleted uranium slugs. "How many rounds do we have?" Dong-hyun asked. 2,000 for each railgun, plus 500 nuclear missiles, and 3,000 conventional explosive shells. An alien weapons specialist who had been assigned to observe human tactics looked confused. "Captain, why do you carry explosive shells? In space there is no atmosphere for shockwaves to propagate. Chemical explosives are ineffective." Minho grinned. "They're not for destroying ships from the outside. They're for when we get close enough to put holes in their hull and fire these babies directly inside." The alien looked horrified. "You plan to engage in close-range combat? That is suicide in modern space warfare." "Maybe," Dong-hyun replied. "But sometimes suicide tactics work because nobody expects them." The Devourer fleet arrived exactly on schedule. They came out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark ships creating shadows against the starfield. The Allied fleet immediately began its defensive maneuvers, moving into the carefully planned battle positions. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Kyung-soo, came the broadcast. Enemy contact confirmed. Begin Phase 1 of the engagement plan. The battle started at extreme range, with both sides firing across millions of kilometers of space. The Allied ships launched their most powerful weapons, streams of plasma hot enough to melt planets, quantum torpedoes that could crack moons, particle beams that moved at near light speed. For a few minutes, it looked like the Allies might have a chance. Several Devourer ships took hits and appeared to be damaged. But then something happened that had occurred in every previous battle. The enemy adapted. Devourer shields began deflecting plasma streams that had penetrated them moments before. Their hull armor started absorbing quantum torpedoes without damage. Within 20 minutes, the Allied weapons were completely ineffective. All ships Phase 2, Admiral Kyung-soo ordered, but his voice already carried the sound of defeat. The Allies tried different weapons, different tactics, different approaches. Nothing worked. The Devourers had seen it all before, absorbed it, all before learned to counter it all before. Then the Devourers began their counterattack. The enemy weapons were unlike anything in the galaxy. They fired beams of pure darkness that seemed to erase whatever they touched. Allied ships that had withstood the test of centuries vanished in seconds, simply ceasing to exist. Fleet Admiral to all ships, came the desperate broadcast. Begin retreat protocols. All vessels fall back to Rally Point Beta. But the retreat was turning into a massacre. The Devourer ships were faster than anything the Allies had, and their weapons had unlimited range. One by one, the proudest vessels in the galaxy were being erased from existence. Captain Dong-hyun watched the slaughter from his position in the support area. His crew stood at their stations, helpless to intervene, following orders to stay away from the battle. Captain, Subin reported, we've lost contact with 60% of the Allied fleet. The remainder are scattered and running. Sir, Minho added, the aliens are right about one thing. Those Devourer weapons would probably destroy us in one hit. Dong-hyun studied the tactical display, watching as humanity's new allies died by the thousands. The Devourers were herding the retreating ships, driving them into kill zones where they could be destroyed more efficiently. Captain, his communication officer called out, we're receiving a direct transmission from Admiral Kyung-soo's flagship. The alien admiral appeared on screen. His perfect composure finally cracked. Behind him, Dong-hyun could see his bridge crew working frantically at damaged stations. Captain Dong-hyun, our fleet is broken. We estimate less than 30% survival if we continue this retreat. I know your orders were to avoid combat, but we need every ship we can get. Will you assist in covering our withdrawal? Dong-hyun looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared. Only an idiot wouldn't be scared. But they were also angry. They had come across the galaxy to fight, and they had been forced to watch their allies die while doing nothing. Admiral, Dong-hyun replied, and with respect, covering a retreat isn't what humans do best. What do you mean? I mean, we're not very good at running away, but we're excellent at making the other guy wish he'd never started a fight. Before the Admiral could respond, Dong-hyun cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Attention all hands, this is the captain. We came here to fight. The aliens think our weapons are too primitive to matter. The enemy thinks we're not worth their attention. Let's show them both how wrong they are. He turned to his helmsman. Plot a course directly toward the largest Devourer ship. Full speed. Sir, his first officer said quietly. That's suicide. Maybe. But I'd rather die fighting than live knowing we ran away when the galaxy needed us. The Indomitable broke formation and began accelerating toward the enemy fleet. Its primitive engines, derided by alien engineers, pushed the heavy ship forward with brutal efficiency. Captain, the communication officer reported, we're receiving urgent messages from the Allied fleet. They're ordering us to return to formation. Tell them we're experiencing communication difficulties, Dong-hyun replied. Subin, what's the status of our weapons? All railguns loaded and ready. Nuclear missiles armed. Conventional shells loaded in the close-range cannons. Minho, I want you to target the biggest enemy ship you can find. When we get in range, hit it with everything we've got." The alien survivors watched in horror as the single human ship charged, directly toward the Devourer fleet. To them, it looked like the worst kind of primitive behavior, a meaningless sacrifice that would accomplish nothing except the death of brave but foolish humans. But Captain Dong Hyun had studied human military history, and he knew something the aliens didn't understand. Sometimes the most effective tactic was the one nobody expected. The first railgun slug hit the Devourer flagship at 30% of light speed. The massive enemy vessel, which had been smoothly pursuing a group of retreating alien cruisers, suddenly lurched to one side as a simple piece of metal punched through its adaptive hull like it was paper. Alarms that had never sounded in 1,000 victories began screaming throughout the Devourer ship. "Direct hit," Minho shouted from his weapons station. Their shields didn't even register the impact. Captain Dong Hyun watched as the enemy ship tried to compensate for the damage. "Fire again, all railguns, continuous fire." The Indomitable unleashed a storm of metal slugs. Each projectile was nothing more than depleted uranium shaped into a dense penetrator, accelerated by magnetic fields to incredible velocity. The Devourer's adaptive shields, designed to counter energy weapons, had no defense against simple kinetic impact. "Captain," Subin reported with excitement in her voice, "their ship is venting atmosphere. We're actually hurting them." The Devourer flagship tried to respond, turning its terrible dark energy weapons toward the human ship. But the Indomitable was already moving, using its multiple engines to change direction in ways that confused enemy targeting systems designed to track graceful alien vessels. "Incoming," the sensor operator warned. A beam of pure darkness passed through the space where the Indomitable had been just seconds before. Where it touched a nearby asteroid, the rock simply ceased to exist. "That would have been unpleasant," Dong Hyun said calmly. "Minho, prepare nuclear missiles. I want to put some real holes in that ship." The first nuclear warhead detonated against the Devourer flagship's hull with the force of a small star. The enemy vessel, which had never experienced the primitive concept of explosive force, was completely unprepared for the violent expansion of matter and energy. "Sir," Dr. Yunji called from her science station, "I'm reading massive internal damage to their ship. Their hull is breached in 17 different locations." Commander Jae-sung, leader of the ship's marine contingent, approached the captain. "Sir, if their hull is breached, we could board them." Dong Hyun stared at him. "Board them? In space? That's insane." "Yes, sir. That's why it might work." Within minutes, Jae-sung and 30 Marines were suited up in combat armor, carrying weapons. That would have seemed primitive to any civilized species. Chemical explosive charges, projectile rifles, and metal blades for close combat. "Remember," Jae-sung told his team as they prepared to launch in a small assault craft, "these enemies have fought every advanced species in the galaxy, but they've never fought humans with knives and grenades." The boarding craft, little more than an armored box with engines, slammed into the damaged Devourer hull and cut its way inside using simple thermite charges. The aliens watching from their retreating ships couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Are the humans actually attempting to board an enemy vessel?" Admiral Kyung-soo asked his tactical officer. "Yes, sir. They're using chemical explosives to breach the hull and inserting ground troops for hand-to-hand combat." "That's impossible. No species fights that way in space. It's too dangerous, too unpredictable." Inside the Devourer ship, Jae-sung and his Marines found themselves in a nightmare environment. The vessel's interior was a maze of organic-looking corridors that seemed to shift and change as they moved through them. But the Marines adapted quickly, using their explosive charges to blast new paths when the existing ones became impassable. "Contact," one Marine shouted as the first Devourer defenders appeared. The enemy beings were unlike anything in human experience, shapeless masses of dark matter that could change form at will. But they had never faced opponents who fought with simple kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. The Marine's rifle fired simple metal bullets propelled by chemical reactions. The Devourers, accustomed to energy weapons they could absorb and adapt to, had no defense against projectiles that worked through basic physics. "They're falling back," Jae-sung reported over the radio. "Whatever these things are, they don't know how to fight against primitive weapons." Meanwhile, the Indomitable continued its attack on the Devourer flagship. Engineering Chief Siak Jin had taken over damage control, and his methods horrified the alien observers. When sophisticated computer systems failed under enemy attack, Siak Jin switched to manual controls operated by hand. When energy shields collapsed, he deployed physical armor plates that extended from the ship's hull. When advanced sensors were damaged, he used simple optical telescopes and human eyesight to track targets. "Chief," one of his engineers reported, "the main power coupling is damaged. We're losing power to the forward weapons." "Then we'll reroute through the backup systems," Sukjin replied, grabbing a welding torch. "Sir, the backup systems weren't designed to handle that much power. They might overload. Then we'll build new ones." Within an hour, Seokjin's team had constructed a completely improvised power distribution system using spare parts, welding equipment, and pure human stubbornness. It violated every principle of efficient engineering, but it worked. The Devourer fleet was beginning to respond to the human attack, but their responses were confused and ineffective. They had absorbed the knowledge of dozens of species, but all of those species fought according to logical, predictable patterns. Humans didn't. Tactical Coordinator Hyo Sung was directing the ship's movements from the bridge, and her tactics made no sense to anyone watching. When enemy ships moved to surround the Indomitable, she ordered it to accelerate directly toward the largest concentration of enemies. When Devourer weapons locked onto their position, she had the ship perform maneuvers that put massive stress on the hull but broke enemy targeting. "Captain," she reported, "their fleet is trying to adapt to our attack patterns, but they can't predict what we're going to do next." "Why not?" "Because we're not following any logical tactical doctrine. We're making it up as we go along, Doctor." Yoonji had been monitoring the enemy's responses from her science station, and what she discovered changed everything. "Captain, the Devourers are starting to malfunction. Their collective consciousness is having trouble processing our tactics." "What do you mean?" "They learn by absorbing the knowledge and experience of their enemies. But human warfare doctrine includes concepts they can't understand. Acceptable losses, Pyrrhic victories, kamikaze attacks. When they try to absorb our tactical knowledge, it creates contradictions in their thinking." Dong-hyun understood immediately. "They're used to fighting rational enemies, but humans aren't always rational in battle." "Exactly. We're willing to sacrifice everything for victory, even when victory is impossible. That concept is breaking their collective mind." The battle raged for hours. 3 more Devourer ships were destroyed by human weapons, their adaptive technology useless against simple kinetic energy and chemical explosives. But the Indomitable was taking massive damage. Hull breaches appeared faster than repair teams could seal them. Weapon systems failed under the strain of continuous combat. "Captain," his first officer reported, "we've lost main propulsion. Life support is failing on decks 7 through 12. We have fires in the missile magazine." Dong Min-yun looked around his battered bridge. Half his crew was injured and the ship was barely holding together. But they had accomplished something that no other force in galactic history had managed. They had hurt the Devourers. "Sir," the communication officer called out, "we're receiving a message from Commander Jae-sung's boarding party." Jae-sung's voice came through the speakers, interrupted by the sound of explosions and gunfire. "Captain, we've reached what looks like their command center. These things don't know how to fight against infantry tactics. We're setting charges throughout their ship. Can you get out?" "Negative, sir. Too many enemies between us and the exit. But we can make sure this ship never threatens anyone again." Dong-hyun felt his heart sink. He was about to lose 30 of his best people, but he knew Jae-sung was right. Sometimes the only way to win was to make sure the enemy lost everything. "Do it," he ordered. The explosion that destroyed the Devourer flagship could be seen from thousands of kilometers away. The massive enemy vessel, which had survived battles against the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, was torn apart by simple chemical explosives placed by human marines. But the Indomitable was dying too. The ship's power systems were failing, life support was barely functioning, and enemy reinforcements were closing in. "Captain," Minho reported from his damaged weapons station, We're down to our last nuclear missile. Dong Hyun looked at the tactical display. More Devourer ships were approaching, drawn by the destruction of their flagship. His ship was surrounded, outnumbered, and nearly destroyed. But he had one option left, one final card to play. It was the most human tactic of all. If you can't win, make sure the enemy pays a price they'll never forget. All hands, this is the captain, he announced over the ship's communication system. Prepare for ramming speed. The alien survivors watching from their retreating ships couldn't believe what they were seeing. The human vessel, its hull cracked, and burning, was accelerating directly toward the largest Devourer ship in the enemy fleet. They're going to ram it, Admiral Kyung-soo whispered. They're going to sacrifice their entire ship. The Indomitable struck the Devourer vessel at a significant fraction of light speed. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers experienced something they had never known before: uncertainty. The destruction of their flagship and the loss of over 200,000 absorbed minds created a gap in their collective consciousness. But worse than the physical damage was the psychological contamination. They had absorbed the tactical knowledge of Captain Dong Hyun and his crew in the moment of the ship's destruction, and that knowledge was poison to their unified thinking. Admiral, So Young received the news of the Indomitable's sacrifice while en route to Earth with the largest human fleet ever assembled. The message came from Admiral Kyung-soo himself, transmitted through quantum communication across half the galaxy. Admiral So Young, the alien commander said, his voice filled with amazement and grief. Your people have accomplished something we thought impossible. They hurt the Devourers. They made them bleed, and in doing so, they may have given us the key to victory. So Young listened to the full report in stunned silence. A single human ship had done more damage to the enemy than entire galactic fleets, but the cost had been 800 lives, including some of the best people humanity had ever produced. Admiral, her tactical officer, strategic analyst Ji-eun, spoke up. We're receiving urgent requests from 47 different species. They all want the same thing. What? They want us to teach them how to fight like humans. Within weeks, the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were sending their military leaders to Earth. The planet that had been dismissed as primitive and backward was suddenly the center of galactic military planning. Fleet Commander Wu Jin found himself in the strange position of teaching alien admirals how to wage war. The concepts he presented horrified them. You must understand, he explained to a group of alien officers. Human military doctrine is based on one simple principle: victory at any cost. We will sacrifice ships, crews, entire fleets if necessary to achieve our objectives. A tall alien with crystalline skin raised one of its forearms. Commander, such thinking is wasteful. Surely it is better to preserve your forces and find a more efficient solution. Efficiency is a luxury, Wu Jin replied. When your enemy is trying to exterminate your entire species, you don't worry about waste. You worry about survival. He activated a holographic display showing human military history. Look at our wars. We have never fought a conflict where we weren't willing to accept massive casualties for strategic advantage. In one war, we sacrificed 60,000 soldiers in a single day just to advance a few kilometers. In another, we built weapons capable of destroying our entire planet. The aliens looked disturbed. That seems irrational. Maybe, but it works. The Devourers understand rational warfare. They can predict and counter logical tactics, but they can't understand an enemy that's willing to lose everything just to hurt them. Back in space, the effects of human tactical knowledge were spreading through the Devourer collective consciousness like a virus. Their perfect unity was fracturing as contradictory human concepts took root in their shared mind. Dr. Yoonji, now serving as humanity's chief xenopsychologist, had been studying the reports from the battle. What she discovered changed the entire war effort. The problem, she explained to the assembled galactic commanders, is that the Devourers' greatest strength has become their greatest weakness. They absorb the knowledge of every species they defeat, but human knowledge is incompatible with their collective thinking. Admiral Kyung-soo, now serving as the Galactic Fleet's strategic coordinator, leaned forward. Explain. Human warfare includes concepts that can't coexist in a unified mind. We plan for victory and defeat simultaneously, We prepare for honor and dishonor. We accept that some battles can't be won, but must be fought anyway. When the Devourers absorbed these ideas from the Indomitable's crew, it created logical paradoxes in their collective consciousness. She activated a display showing the current status of the Devourer fleet. They're making mistakes now. Their coordination is breaking down. Ships are acting independently instead of as a unified force. Captain Hyunwoo, now promoted to admiral, and commanding the growing human fleet, studied the tactical reports. So how do we use this? We do what humans do best, Dr. Eunji replied. We fight dirty. The new human warships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Built using human engineering principles, they were ugly, redundant, and incredibly effective. Each vessel carried multiple backup systems, kinetic weapons, and crews trained in the chaotic art of human warfare. Admiral Hyunwoo's flagship, the UES Retribution, was a monument to human stubbornness. Its hull was covered in armor plating that could be ejected if damaged. Its weapons were designed to function even when the ship's computers were destroyed. Its crew was trained to fight using manual controls if all else failed. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, the Devourer fleet has been located in the Kepler system. They appear to be confused. The tactical display showed something unprecedented. The Devourer ships were moving in random patterns, sometimes firing on each other, sometimes simply stopping in space as if paralyzed by indecision. Their collective consciousness is breaking down, Dr. Eunji observed. The human tactical knowledge is causing conflicts they can't resolve. Admiral So Young, commanding the Second Human Fleet, opened a channel to all ships. All vessels, this is Admiral So Young. Today we finish what the Indomitable started. We fight for Captain Dong Hyun and his crew. We fight for every species the Devourers have destroyed, and we fight to show the galaxy that sometimes the best defense is a good offense. The combined galactic fleet, now reorganized according to human military doctrine, advanced on the Devourer position. But this time the aliens fought differently. They had learned to accept casualties for strategic gain. They had learned to make their enemies pay a price even in defeat. They had learned to fight like humans. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Ships on both sides were destroyed in massive numbers. But for the first time since the war began, the Devourers were losing. Their command structure is completely broken, reported Fleet Coordinator Hyo Sung from her position on the Retribution. Individual ships are fighting, but they're not coordinating. The collective consciousness has fragmented. Admiral Hyunwoo watched as Devourer vessels that had once moved, with perfect unity, now fired randomly, unable to coordinate their attacks. All ships press the attack, don't give them time to recover. The final phase of the battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Devourer fleet had been completely destroyed. More importantly, their collective consciousness had been shattered, beyond repair. The fragments that survived fled into deep space, no longer the unified threat that had terrorized the galaxy. In the aftermath, Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, looking out at the wreckage that filled space around them. The cost had been enormous. Nearly half the combined fleet had been destroyed, but they had won. Admiral, his communication officer reported, we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. 17 different species are requesting formal military alliances with humanity. Ambassador Yu Jin, now serving as humanity's chief diplomatic representative, found herself in a very different situation than the first alien contact. Where once the galactic community had dismissed humans as primitive, they now treated them with a mixture of respect and fear. The Galactic Council has voted, the lead ambassador informed her, to offer humanity permanent membership with full voting rights. Additionally, we would like to request that human military advisors be stationed with all major galactic defense forces. Yu Jin smiled. We'll consider your offer, but understand that if humanity takes responsibility for galactic defense, we'll do it our way. That means accepting casualties, taking risks, and sometimes making choices that seem irrational to more civilized species. We understand, the alien replied. We have learned that sometimes civilization must be defended by those willing to be uncivilized. Years later, a monument was erected in Earth orbit to commemorate the crew of the UES Indomitable. The inscription, written in hundreds of galactic languages, carried a simple message. They called us primitive. They called our weapons crude. They called our tactics barbaric. But when the galaxy hung in the balance, they called us for help. Captain Dong-hyun and his crew had sacrificed themselves to save a galaxy that had dismissed them as insignificant. In doing so, they had proven that sometimes the most primitive solution was the most effective, and that there were times when civilization could only be preserved by those willing to abandon civilized behavior. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. In the darkness between stars, survival didn't belong to the most advanced species or the most intelligent or the most elegant. It belonged to the species willing to fight dirty, take losses, and never give up. It belonged to humanity. Dr. Yoonji, now director of the Galactic Institute for Strategic Studies, often ended her lectures with a simple observation. The Devourers conquered 12 civilizations before they met humanity. They absorbed the knowledge of species that had existed for millions of years. But they made one fatal mistake. What was that? Her students would ask. They assumed that more advanced meant better prepared for war.